It started with a simple question: where did all the artifacts go? Thousands of items, collected over more than a century, sent to one of the most powerful scientific institutions on the planet, and then nothing. No display, no study, no public record, just silence. The Smithsonian Institution is America's attic. It holds over 155 million objects, art, bones, tools, fossils, relics from every corner of human history. But here's the problem: less than 2% of that collection is ever shown to the public. The rest sits in storage facilities, warehouses, and underground vaults scattered across the country, out of sight, out of mind, out of reach. And according to a growing number of researchers, that's exactly the point. Let me tell you a story that most people have never heard. In 1881, a man named John Wesley Powell took control of the Smithsonian's Bureau of Ethnology. Powell was brilliant, ambitious, and completely devoted to one specific view of American prehistory. He believed that before Europeans arrived, North America was inhabited only by the ancestors of modern Native American tribes. No one else. No advanced civilizations. No mysterious builders. No unknown races. Just simple hunter-gatherers. Anything that contradicted this view, Powell considered it dangerous nonsense, and he had the power to do something about it. Under Powell's leadership, the Smithsonian became the final authority on American archaeology. If you dug something up, you sent it to them. If you wanted funding, you went through them. If you published research, they decided if it was legitimate. Powell didn't just shape the narrative, he controlled it. Now, here's where things get uncomfortable. During the late 1800s and early 1900s, amateur archaeologists across America were making extraordinary discoveries. Ancient copper mines in Michigan, mysterious stone chambers in New England, burial mounds containing artifacts that didn't match any known culture. These discoveries were documented, photographed, written about in newspapers and scientific journals, and then they were sent to the Smithsonian. Most were never seen again. Some cases, the Smithsonian acknowledged receiving the items but claimed they were misplaced or lost in storage. In other cases, they denied the artifacts ever existed at all despite newspaper records and eyewitness testimony proving otherwise. One of the most famous examples involves the Grand Canyon. In 1909, the Arizona Gazette published a front-page story about a massive cave system discovered in the canyon walls. According to the article, the caves contained mummies, hieroglyphics, and artifacts suggesting an advanced ancient civilization with possible Egyptian or Asian origins. The expedition was reportedly funded by the Smithsonian. Today, the Smithsonian says it never happened. They have no record of any such expedition. The specific location mentioned in the article is now a restricted zone that tourists cannot access. Convenient timing? Maybe, but the pattern keeps repeating. Let's talk about the burial mounds. Across the eastern United States, thousands of earthen mounds dot the landscape. Some are small, others are massive, larger than Egyptian pyramids in terms of sheer volume. For centuries, people wondered who built them. Early European settlers often believed they were constructed by a lost civilization, perhaps visitors from overseas who arrived long before Columbus. The Smithsonian had a different answer. They declared that all mounds were built by Native American tribes. End of story. No mystery, no lost civilizations, just local populations doing local things. But here's what they didn't publicize. Their own field researchers found artifacts inside those mounds that didn't fit the narrative. Copper tools with European-style designs, tablets covered in unknown writing systems, skeletal remains with physical characteristics unlike any known Native American population. Those researchers wrote detailed reports. They sent the artifacts to Washington, and then silence. Decades later, investigators trying to locate those specific items were told they couldn't be found. No explanation, no tracking information, just gone. You might be wondering why this would happen. What's the motive? Here's the uncomfortable truth about how science actually works. Scientific institutions don't just seek truth. They also protect their credibility, their funding, their influence. Imagine you're running the Smithsonian in 1910. You've spent 30 years building a consensus around a specific version of American prehistory. Your museum displays, your textbooks, your entire professional reputation. Then someone sends you an artifact that blows a hole in everything you've ever said. What do? Admit you were wrong? Watch your funding evaporate? Let rival institutions claim you missed the truth for decades? Or do you quietly file that artifact away in a basement somewhere and hope nobody asks questions? Human institutions are run by humans. Humans have egos, careers, legacies to protect. Truth doesn't always win that battle. Now, I want to be clear about something. This isn't about demonizing the Smithsonian. Thousands of dedicated scientists have worked there over the years. Many of them genuinely believe they're preserving history and advancing knowledge. But systems can fail even when individuals mean well. When one organization controls what counts as legitimate archaeology, problems are inevitable. Discoveries that don't fit get dismissed. Researchers who ask the wrong questions get marginalized, and artifacts that challenge the consensus get buried, sometimes literally. The Smithsonian isn't necessarily evil, but it might be blind in ways it doesn't even recognize. Let's look at what's happening right now. In recent years, independent researchers have used Freedom of Information Act requests to access Smithsonian records. What they've found is troubling. Huge gaps in cataloging. Items listed as location unknown. Entire collections that seem to have vanished between audits. One researcher discovered that artifacts sent from a specific archaeological site in Ohio were received by the Smithsonian in 1897, logged into their system, and then never mentioned again. No transfer records, no disposal documentation, nothing, just a hole in history. The Smithsonian's official response? They're a large institution. Things get misplaced. It happens, sure. But when the same pattern shows up over and over again, specifically with artifacts that challenge mainstream narratives, coincidence becomes a harder sell. There's another layer to this that deserves attention. Native American communities have their own complicated relationship with the Smithsonian. For decades, the institution collected human remains and sacred objects from indigenous graves, often without permission. Thousands of ancestors were stored in boxes and drawers, studied like specimens rather than treated like people. It took until 1990 for Congress to pass the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, forcing institutions to return remains and sacred items. The Smithsonian resisted at first. They argued that science required access to these materials. Eventually, they complied, partially. But this history reveals something important. The Smithsonian has a documented track record of prioritizing institutional interests over ethical concerns. They held onto things they shouldn't have held. They fought to keep control even when it caused harm. If they did that with human remains everyone knew about, what might they do with controversial artifacts nobody's watching? So where does this leave us? With questions that don't have easy answers. Are there vaults beneath the Smithsonian filled with objects that would rewrite history books? Possibly. We simply don't know because we're not allowed to look. Is every missing artifact proof of a cover-up? No, large institutions lose things. That's reality. But when loss becomes a pattern, when it specifically targets discoveries that threaten consensus, skepticism is reasonable. The Smithsonian holds America's history in its hands. That's an enormous responsibility, and with responsibility should come transparency. In the vaults, digitize everything. Let independent researchers examine what's been hidden for a century. If there's nothing to hide, prove it. Until then, the whispers will continue, and honestly, they should, because history belongs to everyone, not just the institutions that claim to protect it. Thanks for sticking with me on this one. If you want more stories about hidden history and buried truths, hit subscribe. We're just getting started. Leave a comment. What do you think is sitting in those vaults? And would they ever let us see it? I'll see you in the next one.